As we get into this today, I'm going to, um, I said as I was doing this whole thing is a new journey for me. I'm taking this journey. I just get to be in front of y'all as we take this journey kind of together about this whole kingdom thing and how this works. And it's been an interesting journey for me. I can say that I am in the process of being very, very, very much different than I was before. And I'm still working out how that applies and how all the things that come as a result of that. Today's one of those days where I knew this was going to be some new stuff, some things that I haven't really heard preached or put together before. Today's one of those days, and I'm like, I approach that with a little bit of trepidation because, okay, it's new, it's stuff that I haven't really heard taught before. That doesn't mean it's better. That doesn't mean it doesn't even mean necessarily that it's new. It just, I have not heard it taught. I've not heard it expressed quite this way. So I look at that and I think, okay, God, either I'm onto something here or I'm really confused. I don't think that's the case. I don't think the dots kept falling into place better and better as I got into this. So I don't think that's the case. Just bear with me as we get into this today. Hold judgment, if you will, until we get all the way through it, and then weigh it all together as we get into this today. Today, we're going to talk about God needs you. God needs you. And as I titled that, I think, okay, you remember back in, I guess it was World War II, the posters about we need you in the army, and Uncle Sam needs you, and all the guy with the finger pointing, and God needs you. And I had that same envision in my mind, God pointing his finger at you saying, I need you. I need you to do your part. I need you to step forward. I need you to cooperate with me, or I'm not going to be able to do what I need to do. God needs you. Let's read our key verse, and then we'll get into this a little bit today. Matthew 6:33. But first, be concerned about his kingdom and what has his approval, what already has his approval. He's the one that starts the process. As you seek his kingdom, you'll find out, okay, I'm seeking the kingdom. So the things that he tells me as I seek the kingdom already has his approval. It's not a matter of finding his approval. It's a matter of I'm going to participate with the things that already have his approval, the things that he's already doing. I remember a class I did a long time ago, Experiencing God. I don't know if you all ever took that class or remember that class. One of the key points in the idea of experiencing God was find what God is doing and join him. That sounds simple, but we miss that all the time. We think, okay, I've got to do something new. I've got to do something different, and then I'm going to ask God to bless it. And the truth of the matter is there's nothing new under the sun. God will just implement things that he has already done in different ways, through different people with different styles. It seems new to us because we haven't seen it that way. We haven't done it that way before, but it's not new to God. So in our effort to, I've got to do something new, I've got to do something different, we miss sometimes, okay, God, what are you doing? Instead of me trying to recreate the wheel and come up with something to put my name on it, what are you already doing? Where can I join you? Where can I assist? Where can I enable my efforts to help what already has your approval? And that's what we should be concerned about first. That's what we should be thinking about first, pursuing first. And then when you do that, all these other things that we normally seek will be provided for us, will be added to us. We don't get to they get to the place where they start chasing you down because so many times we're not seeking the things that God is already doing, that already has his approval. Okay, last week we started talking about how God had complete authority over the earth, and he gave that complete authority to Adam. So he's on the outside looking in as far as creation goes. He gave Adam all authority on the things that happened on the planet. Now, one thing I'm going to add about this is, and I've been thinking about it, one thing that he did not include in that authority is dominion over other humans. So Adam did not have the right to dominate or exercise authority over any other human being. just over the planet and the animals and the systems of the planet, but not over each other. Well, the thing I've been thinking about is, okay, the kingdom, the principle of kingdom, the principle that God ordained with dominion and authority does not allow you to dominate somebody else. Okay, think about the idea that the borrower is servant to the lender. Isn't that a form of domination? If you loan somebody money, if you are in debt with credit cards, if you're in debt with whatever, who's making the rules in that situation? The lender, the person that had the money that you borrowed and used. So the idea of us having debt is not a kingdom principle. Now, I'm not saying that you can't use debt for investment purposes. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about your average normal living is not a kingdom principle. So God is willing to assist us to get out of that situation and write the kingdom principle in our lives. And I've been thinking about that. I'm like, okay, if that's really what you're saying, if that's really what we're doing, then let's get out of debt. Let's do whatever we've got to do to get ourselves out of debt and put ourselves back in the right place where we are not being dominated by some other person, by some other institution. And I'm not going to preach about that today. I'm not going to talk about that today. It's just something that I've been thinking about, that this whole idea of debt and borrower servant to the lender and all that stuff, it does not fit with the authority that God gave us or didn't give us to dominate each other. Anyway, moving right along there. Did you want to say something, Scott? No, I see. All right.
Yeah, something that arose, so I had to throw in my mouth.
Okay. Okay. All right. So today's lesson, God needs you. Here we go. Genesis 2:18 through 20. We said last week that God set up this whole system. His plan for the earth when he created it was, okay, I'm going to make my invisible kingdom visible, and I'm going to use the human that I created to help me rule this new planet that's now visible until such a day as his invisible world becomes visible. Does that make sense? That was his desire, that was his plan, that's what he had in mind when he created things. I'm going to create a person that will use my assistance, but I'm going to use his authority to rule the planet, to do what I need to be done on the planet to manifest my kingdom, which is invisible, into the visible world. So let's see an example of how that was intended to work, and then some ways in which it kind of works, but it's a little different than what we might see. Genesis 2:18 through 20. Genesis 2:18 through 20. It is not good for the man to be alone, so I will create a companion for him, a perfectly suited partner. 19. So out of the same ground the man was made from, the eternal God sculpted every sort of animal and every kind of bird that flies up in the sky. Now, I don't know about you, but I missed that. I had never seen that before. I knew that God created man out of the earth, out of the dirt, but I never saw where he created the animals out of the dirt. Am I alone there? Or did y'all miss that as well? Okay, good. I'm glad I'm not the only one that just totally missed it. And I don't know how I missed that, but I had never consciously paid attention to the fact that God made the animals out of the dirt too. Anyway, sculpted every sort of animal and every kind of bird that flies up in the sky. Then he brought them to the man and gave him the authority. Gave him who? Him, the man, the authority to name each creature as he saw fit. Whatever he decided to call it, that became its name. Thus, the man chose the names for the domesticated animals, birds, and wild beasts. But none of these creatures was a right and proper partner for Adam. So God creates all of creation looking for a suitable companion for Adam, and none was found. So he ends up going to create woman out of the side of Adam. But it's interesting to me that God used Adam's authority to name all the animals. You see the cooperation there. You see how Adam has the authority on the earth, and God is telling him what to do. God is telling him what to say, telling him how to do stuff. But it's still Adam that does it. So whose idea was it to name the animals? God's idea. How was God involved in that process? Tell him to name them, bringing the animals to Adam one at a time. And I'm going to suggest God giving Adam the idea for the names. I think it was a partnership. It was a mutual thing. They were working together for him to assign the names. Who actually named the animals? Adam did, not God. Now, God created the animals. God brought the animals, God brought the animals to Adam, but Adam was the one that actually had the authority to name the animals. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I think that you talked about two critical situations here in part of the animals and partner is what I'm going to talk about right there. You know, God did inspire Adam on how to name animals.
Right.
Because he gave him information.
Right.
He gave him the knowledge of creation and identify things. So animals are, you know, named like, you know, elephant. If you go into the name of elephant and things like that, you understand that the elephant is named because of its origin, where it reigns and things like that. And then, so I believe that God gave him the wisdom and the understanding to name the animals. And so you presented that for you, but partner also means helper.
Right.
So you're a partner and a partner.
Right.
You don't tell them what to do, right?
You suggest.
You guys, yes. And so I really like that because you had already mentioned that man was not given the right to dominate another human being.
Okay. So this is a positive example of how God intended the system to work. Now, we didn't get many examples before Adam blew it of the system working like it's supposed to. The system is still in play even after Adam messed up. And that's what we're going to talk about now is how it continued to work even after Adam messed up. And we're going to see some things, hopefully, that we've never seen before, but it's the same system. God gave all the authority to man. And it's his desire for him to use the authority that he gave us to get his will done on the planet. Now, when we gave that authority over to the devil, what is he doing? We still have the authority. He didn't have the authority, but he's using us to use our authority in a negative fashion. He needs your permission to use your authority, either God or the devil, either one of them. Both of them need your permission to use your authority on the earth to inhabit a change, to force a change into the situation, good or bad. Depends on who's giving the instructions. But it's your authority that's being used either way. All right, let's move forward a few chapters. Genesis 11, 1 through 9. Genesis 11, 1 through 9. There was a time when everyone on the earth spoke the very same language. As many of these people began moving from the eastern regions into the western part of Mesopotamia, they settled down on a plain in the land of Shinar. Since stone was not readily available, they discovered how to make bricks and use tar and mortar to build their structures. People to each other, come on, let's make bricks out of mud and bake them in the fire. Then we can build all we want. Let's go build ourselves a city with a huge tower that reaches into heaven. That way we will make a name for ourselves. If we don't, we'll run the risk of being scattered all over the earth. The Eternal One came down and took a look at the city and the tower that the children of Adam were building. Okay, let me stop right here. Did they have the authority to build this tower? Yes, they did. God gave them authority on the earth. He probably gave them the wisdom on how to figure out how to make the bricks. That was probably a God idea. God knew, okay, I'm going to need things built later, so I'm going to show somebody how to build bricks out of tar and mortar or mud or whatever it is. I'm going to do that because it will advance my kingdom. So they are operating within their authority right now when they decide to build this tower. Are they dominating each other? They're not. Are they dominating anybody else? No, they're working together. They're using their authority. Let's continue. God came down to look at this. He was not pleased. The Eternal One, will you look at that? The people are all together on this. With one language, they're able to start this kind of project. This is only the beginning of what they will do. soon they will think can accomplish anything and everything on their own. On their own. So what was the problem that God had with this? They're in unison, they're using the authority that I gave them, but I'm not involved in their decision-making process. I'm not involved in the direction to what is happening here. They're doing it for the wrong motives, but what they're doing is legal. It's after. We'll go back to the flood in a minute, but yeah, it's after the flood. So, the end of verse 6, soon they think they will accomplish anything and everything on their own. Verse 7, let's go down and break this up. We'll confuse their language. They won't be able to understand each other's words. This is how the Eternal One scattered the people of Shinar from all across the surface of the earth. Since they were unable to communicate, they stopped working on the city and went their separate ways. So this was why the city was called Babel, because it was all there that the Eternal confused the language of all peoples and scattered them all across the surface of the earth. Did the people have the authority to build the tower? Yes, they did. They were operating in their authority. Could God stop them from doing that? He did, but he didn't. Could God stop them from building the tower? No, because he had already given them the authority to do it. So he couldn't just say, okay, no, I'm against this. No, this is not going to happen. What did he have to do?
Make it where they couldn't understand each other.
Couldn't understand each other. So now nobody can communicate. Could they have still continued to build the tower?
Would have been harder.
It would have been much harder. But legally, they could have, if they were willing to endure the frustration, they could have continued to build the tower. So how did God stop them? Did he infringe upon their authority, or did he just redirect it?
Well, he scattered them all over the earth.
I don't know that he scattered them, but they ended up being scattered. But it was the language that he messed with,
Yeah.
not the authority. He didn't stop them per se. He just slanted the situation differently so that they were not as efficient in what they had set out to do. Do you see the authority at play here? Man's operating in his authority. God can't violate that. So he has to come up with a different way to address this issue. Go ahead.
I believe that the way that what you have said is kind of good. And what I have to say with that is like all sovereignty. God is a sovereign God, correct? God already understands and knows. And it says in the word of God that God has already put a plan for Jesus, right? Before man was ever created. Because he already knew what he was going to create. He already knew something was going to have free will. And in that free will, there's room for error, right? And so he already had a plan that if and when that error was to occur into a free will situation, he was able to restore that creation back unto him.
Right.
Right? But that wasn't his will. He didn't sovereignly plan for man to sin against it. We're the sin against themselves, rather. And so anyways, what I'm trying to help address is a lot of the times we hear these sayings out of the Bible that if you grab a hold of that idealism in itself, it can lead towards a poor understanding of the way that God has directed and purposed this life as we know it, this world.
Right. Right. Okay. He's still got to operate within the law that he set up. He's not going to violate his own plan, his own statutes, his own legal framework. He's not going to violate. He cannot violate it. So he's got to figure out a way, and figure out it's not the right way to say it. He already knows how he's going to do it, but he's got to come up with I'm going to call it a workaround of the system, using the same rules, but in a different way so that he gets the result he wants without violating the system that he created.
I mean, just like the people that were in the earthly realm, they didn't know God doing this. You would automatically think it was evil because manipulation, chaos, confusion.
From the different languages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And see again, and that's why it takes us to be able to to meditate, right? To meditate in God's kind of way is separate from everyone else. If everyone else says to meditate, clear everything out of your mind, and the first thing that comes to mind is what you're supposed to accept as something to believe or to consider. But God's way of meditation is to mutter, it's to murmur, to meditate on the word of God, and it's to recite in your heart and your spirit, and to talk to God. That's God's kind of meditation. But what they were doing, their motive in the direction was not God's intent. So what he had done at that point was he had to do something to frustrate the plans of the people so that they won't consider themselves as achieving a level of
Godness.
yes.
Yeah, of deity, right.
Deity.
Okay, let's talk about it for a second. They were all in one accord. They were all going the same direction. They were all using the authority that they had together. And God said, this thing can't be stopped. What if we recognize the authority that God has already given us and we all start moving together in God's direction? Wouldn't the same thing be true? That we would create something that couldn't be stopped, that couldn't be deterred. So now the objective of the enemy is to keep us from getting to that point of unity together, all of us going towards the same goal, with God giving us the instructions that we need and using the authority that we each individually have on the planet.
So let's have denominations, which means division. And we'll just fight.
Touche,
about who's
yes.
right, who's not right, and then the whole world is getting
Yes,
told about Jesus. We're pretty down to preaching.
Step along, like separating the languages, it seems like God just comes to himself, like you said, that we all could have, we should be able to do this. And do the right ways, but if you change the languages, that automatically say, crap, now we can't. Now you can't do something because I just said, right? That's what.
to prevent them from
I mean, it's not that we do evil, but it also stops them from doing it.
to do good, right?
What does verse 4 say in that the version of the voice?
Well, I would have to say that he didn't stop them from doing good. Because we regardless of everyone, people have their own language, they still, once they had a universal language, they still understood principles that were good, and they can still perpetuate in that manner. But what I will say is yeah, God is sovereign and he has the final say in it. But he still isn't all sovereign, because again, we have free will and he was all sovereign. Like what I was talking
He
about
doesn't
before.
He doesn't dictate
We're not
the activity.
allowed, man, to get to where they are.
He knows what they're going to choose, but they still choose it.
Right.
I think that was, I liked what you said the other day. About, we each have our own, we're in charge of this territory, or homes, it just makes sense, but then the difficulty is that we're all people, and I think my territory was 6 feet of yours.
Right.
And I tell you, you told me, I tell this.
Right.
And that all, it seems like my thinking is, you gotta get people to agree, but this is where they disagree in this moment, because God caused that separation.
And I don't know if it was disagreement, but it was a hindrance.
Lack of agreement, or the ability to be able to agree.
They could not reach a consensus because they couldn't communicate.
May I read verse 4 out of here?
Yeah. And
Then they said, come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower whose top reaches into heaven. So let's make a name for ourselves.
that's the problem. That's the idea that God was addressing. Let's make a name for ourselves.
Pride.
Pride, right?
Yes, pride. I think it's so God could never flood them again. They just make this city with a tower that could get in.
And I don't even know that they knew that God could never flood them again. But
Wager to say that was probably the perpetuation of,
Right, yes.
yeah.
what were you gonna say, Brian?
They probably didn't realize that they already had the ear of God. This tower was about
Them,
reaching God
okay?
on their terms.
On their terms, that's good.
But I don't think God was bothered by their unity. But with their unity, they were drawing further away from God. They were reaching to objects, if you will, in the sky.
They were creating a religion.
And I thought that was kind of interesting, reminded of that. Don't want to go political, but Christianity sometimes seems so dividing. And that's a lot of the turnoff
Right,
with the world.
right,
Like your husbands and wives can't even get along, you get divorced almost more than we do. And then you're trying to tell us how to live.
right. Yeah. We have no
So-
credibility.
So, but if you notice in the world, in the secular world, when they have an object that they want to agree on, whether, and it's usually a sin.
Well,
It's
secular
weird.
in our society right
It's-
now.
It's so, if
They
you
can
watch,
so low.
you have a group of people and they all are in unity.
About that
Want
thing.
This,
Right,
the news is in unity,
right,
one side of the government is
Right.
in full unity. And it's just, sometimes just heinous watching these, like, how can people be so blinded?
Well, because they're being loving and kind and accepting everybody where they are.
and the church is not awake to the fact that that's not what Jesus preached at all.
So unified that they actually go against one of the elements of their own people, for instance. The women's movement. has
Right.
been so unified, like
Right.
unified, like that's probably where everything started as far as unity.
Right,
These folks are unified, but now they've actually come up with an element that is against them, and they're so blinded by sin that they don't even see that
yeah,
they're not unified.
that, right, yeah,
They're standing for something they don't even believe in.
yeah,
Well,
Which what I'm saying is they're taking away
go along with
their
my
woman.
prayer-
just a second.
uh,
Okay.
Go along with my prayer request, I'll kind of explain, what is kind of going on in this understanding. So, a guy was walking down the street and he was blaring his music as loud as his Bluetooth speakers could possibly make it. And I was going along with what I was doing and I went, along with the music. And then somebody else said, and then somebody else of a different genre. Okay, so the guy that was blaring his music was saying, listening to, music of such. But a guy from across the street commented on me going along with the tune and called me a racist and said that he can listen to whatever he wants to. Now, what had happened is I responded to him and said that I have a right to listen to whatever I want to, or I have a right to respond to whatever I want to. And anyways, regardless of the scene of what it was, why did the guy at the tattoo shop with a shirt that's not even covering his belly button, with tattoos all over himself and a bald head, try to stick up for the guy that was listening to a different style of music? Because he wants to listen to his metal music as loud as he wants to. So he had a purpose for why he stood up for the other person. But he was completely wrong in his understanding of my motive for toning along with this music. As I'm just going about my business working. Anyways, so that's the reason why God frustrated the plans. And so it's easy, like God knew that if you guys spoke a language, and we spoke a language, and they spoke a language, we would all unify in the area to where we wouldn't have so much frustration. This frustration is not nice to do. However, the golden rule is I would do unto somebody as they would want done unto me. So the perversion was the metal guy stepped up for the Hispanic guy because he wants to do what he wants to do. So he's doing unto people as he wants them to do unto him. You see what I'm saying? So what had happened is evil. That everything was perverted. This world perverts everything.
Yeah.
And that was to establish like what we see on this end of it is when we can unify for the right purpose, when we can seek God, and use 6:33, Matthew, when we do that, God will help us to be unified.
Right.
But when our purpose is to do evil, there is going to be a separation because of the divisions and sectors of evil.
when the church finally does, the real church, the church that's being shaken out and proved that they're not going to fail, not going to bail on things that are godly and things that are true and things that are right. When that church steps forward, the Bible says that they're going to come to the full unity of the faith. And at that point, I think we're going to get our language back. I think we're going to get the common language. And it's not English at that point. There's a spiritual language, there's a spiritual determination that's going to put us back in the unity that's going to have the same effect.
Some people misinterpret tongues, like they're praying in tongues and they're speaking in tongues.
Right,
They're really two different things.
right.
And people, and so.
And that-
Tells us that praying is not for physical edification.
For the
it's
corporate edification, but personal. Right, yeah.
And so, I mean, sometimes I've been just praying and in spirit, whatever, and sometimes I just feel like I get an understanding of something. I don't even know, I mean, it's just kind of a weird deal.
Tongues is one answer to this different language thing, but even beyond that, and I'm not even really talking about that. I'm talking about us just getting to the place where we're all of the same mind, where we're all heading in the same direction. We lay aside all these trivial junk that really keeps us apart and doesn't really amount to a whole lot of
Yeah, the
stuff.
Bible's usually over like stuff like. Cause I mean, there's stuff in the Bible and there's relevance and there's points to it. But it, like, there's laws and stuff, but there's guys like.
Yeah.
That's just for me to tell my story and one day you'll all figure it all out. But-
And we'll reach the point of what really matters.
But those are things we find that were they're ridiculous.
Absolutely. And God's got just laughing or crying at,
Like the
where we
key
spend
is
all of our time.
salvation. The key is following Christ. If you're just saying God will lead you to do what doesn't offend somebody else or that's loving towards everybody else, we're gonna get there. But we get hung up on logistics
Right.
and
Right.
well, I don't like them because they say too many prayers and they stand up, sit down. We get into so.
yeah, we're messed up. Were you gonna say something, Terry?
God has a sense of humor. Well, they said, let's build this tower and so we won't be scattered.
And then he scatters it. That's good. I didn't notice that. That's
I
good.
just looked up there and saw Babel, so this is why the city was called Babel.
Yeah.
Do you know there's a company called Babel?
Yeah.
It teaches you all.
The languages, yes. yes.
I forgot about that. No, I saw that.
I think they spell it differently, but it came from there.
If you think about the frustration, think about like in Oklahoma City, there's an Asian community.
Right.
Right, so they could be around something and understand and probably for the most part. Speaking.
Right.
Like who, I mean, they don't really probably want to go live in a neighborhood where no, they, not one person there can understand them. I'd rather be in a neighborhood where the people at the grocery store can talk to me and I mean, that's, it kind of gives you an idea of how frustrating. But I've never been to another country. I don't know why I haven't.
Did it go to New York City?
But I can't imagine being somewhere where no one around me understands.
Understands the language.
Like eventually you're gonna scatter.
People like to be with people of their same tongue.
Well, eventually you're gonna scatter. It might be a beautiful place to go visit, but eventually you're glad to head back home.
Right.
The,
All right.
the Asian district, was in motion before the Hispanic district, but the Asians had one.
Go to California, go to California,
It was-
or they go, you'd be
It
frustrated.
exceeded. and it
Because you
was
can't understand the way they
called
live.
the Hispanic district, but there were more Asians, more money. And so they were just in the Asian district over there off the western. I
Wow.
lived in that area for some years and my parents lived over there for almost 3 days.
Off the classic? Oh.
Okay, we're digressing. Let's get back. Okay, we talked last week about how if you need, right now the kingdom of God is closed. So as we go through these stories in the Old Testament, the kingdom of God is not accessible. They can't get into it. Jesus has to reintroduce it when he shows up. So the only way that you could participate, if you want to call it that, is through righteousness. Righteousness either being credited to you from your belief, from your faith, or from your obedience. So let's consider this idea of being credited righteousness so that you can participate with God and then see what happens in another story. Genesis 6:9. These are the records of of the generations, the family history of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, one who was just and had right standing with God, blameless in his evil generation. Noah walked, lived in habitual fellowship with God. So Noah was righteous. He had access to whatever God was doing at that point because he was righteous. God had declared him righteous. 7:1. And God said to Noah, come with all your household into the ark, for I have seen you to be righteous, upright, and in right standing before me in this generation. 2 Peter 2:5. 2 Peter 2:5. And God punished the world long ago when he brought a flood to the world that was full of people who were against him. But God saved Noah, who preached about being right with God, and 7 other people with him. So we get the idea that Noah was righteous. Was Noah involved in bringing about the flood, or did God do that totally on his own?
No, obeyed him and built the boat. So I guess he was included.
Okay, let's read it. Let's get an answer from the verse. Hebrews 11:7. And I love the way the Amplified Classic says this here. Prompted by faith, Noah, being forewarned by God concerning events of which as of yet there was no visible sign, took heed and diligently and reverently constructed and prepared an ark for the deliverance of his own family. By this, by what? By his obedience to make the ark, to build the ark, right? That's what we're talking about here. By this, by his obedience, his faith, which relied on God, he passed judgment and sentence on the world's unbelief and became an heir and possessor of righteousness, that relation of being right into which God puts the person who has faith. So what did his obedience end up doing? Correct. When he said, yes, Lord, I'll build a boat, what's he saying? Okay, God, I agree with you. I allow you to use my authority on the earth as a human being, and you bring forth whatever it is you desire to bring forth on the earth.
So have you not agreed, you don't think it would have come?
I don't think that he could have done the flood. I don't think that God could have done the flood unless somebody agreed with him. God didn't have authority. He had given all of the authority on the earth to man. So he required someone, in this case, Noah stepped up, to be credited as righteousness because he was obedient. And now God can use Noah's authority to bring the flood on the earth. Does that make sense? Not asking if you agree with that yet or not. I'm just saying, does the idea make sense? Okay. The same kind of thing happened with Sodom and Gomorrah. Let's read about that. 2 Peter 2, 6 and 8. And God condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, reducing them to ash as a lesson of what he will do with the ungodly in the days to come. Although, again, he did rescue Lot, a person who did what was right in God's eyes and who was distressed by the immorality and the lawlessness of the society around him. Day after day, sights and sounds of their lawlessness were like daggers into that good man's soul. I've never really thought about Lot being in that spot before. I never really thought about him being such a model person that this was constantly affecting him. I'm not disagreeing with this. It's just that that never entered my mind. I never thought about it from his perspective. I always thought, well, if they're so bad, get out of there, move. Don't stick around their thing. And then the account when the 2 angels show up to check out the situation, and the guys want to violate him basically, and he says, "Oh, I'll give you my daughters. Take them instead." And,
Did you know there was more cities other than Sodom and Gomorrah?
that were involved in this. I didn't know that.
There's 5 cities in a month.
Okay.
Not sure where it's found.
But I would go, and there's no way I would even think about offering my daughters in place of these guys just because you guys are heathen, just because you guys are no, I wouldn't do that. Why did God get Lot out of the city before it got burned? He was righteous. And God had an obligation to the righteous to get them out of the mix when he's about to judge the unrighteous. But how did this start? Let's back up a little bit right before this happened. Genesis 18, 16 through 33. Then the men got up to leave. They looked toward Sodom and began walking that direction. Abraham walked with them to send them on their way. The Lord said to himself, should I tell Abraham what I'm going to do now? Abraham will become a great and powerful nation, and all the nations on earth will be blessed because of him. I have made a special agreement with him. Now think about that, a special agreement with him. He was in relationship with Abraham, a covenant, a special agreement with him. I did this so that he would command his children and his descendants to live the way the Lord wants them to. I did this so that they would live right and be fair. Then I, the Lord, can give him what I promised. Verse 20. Then the Lord said, I have heard many times that the people of Sodom and Gomorrah are very evil. 21. I will go and see if they are as bad as I have heard. Then I will know for sure. Now he is planning to do something, but has he decided to do it yet? I will go and see if they are as bad as I have heard. Then I will know for sure. He hasn't decided to do this yet. He's considering to do it. He's thinking about to do it, but I'm going to go check it out first, and then I'll make my decision. There's actually something else going on in the story, and that's what we're going to talk about.
And check it out.
Hmm?
You're saying God is.
That's what he said.
So that's what I was reading.
That's what it says.
I didn't know you had to go. I figured you could see from it.
Well, I don't know why he chose in this case to actually come down, but like I said, there's more to the story than what we've read here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say God needs Adam or Abraham's authority to pull this off. He needs Abraham to get in agreement with him about what is about to happen. Otherwise, he can't do it. Otherwise, he can't do what he is thinking about doing. He needs Abraham to get on board with this. 22. So the men turned and started walking toward Sodom while Abraham stood there before the Lord. Then Abraham approached him and asked, will you destroy the good people while you are destroying those who are evil? At this point in the conversation, is Abraham on board with this? Does he consent? Does he agree that God can destroy Sodom and Gomorrah? So I'm of the conviction that at this point, God can't do it. God has limited his authority, and he is not able to go forward with this until he gets Abraham to consent. 24. What if there are 50 good people in the city? Will you still destroy it? Surely you will save the city for 50 good people living there. Surely you will not destroy the city. Remember, mercy triumphs over judgment. So it's God's heart to extend mercy rather than to extend judgment. He's looking for a way out of this thing. He's looking for a way to negotiate, but what he needs is Abraham to make a decision one way or another about what's about to happen here. You would not destroy 50 good people to kill those who are evil. If that happened, those who are good would be the same as those who are evil. Both would be punished. As the judge of the whole world, surely you would do the right thing. Then the Lord said, if I find 50 good people in the city of Sodom, I will save the whole city. Then Abraham said, compared to you, Lord, I'm only dust and ashes, but let me bother you again and ask you this question. What if there are 5 less than 50? Will you destroy a whole city because of just 5 people? Has Abraham got on board with this yet? He's not on board yet. The Lord said, if I find 45 good people there, I will not destroy the city. 29. Abraham spoke again. He said, and if you only find 40 good people there, will you destroy the city? The Lord said, if I find 40 good people, I will not destroy the city. Is Abraham on board yet? 30. Then Abraham said, Lord, please don't be angry with me, but let you ask this. If only 30 good people are in the city, will you destroy it? The Lord said, if I find 30 good people there, I will not destroy the city. Then Abraham said, Lord, may I bother you again and ask, what if there are 20 good people there? The Lord answered, if I find 20 good people there, I will not destroy the city. Then Abraham said, Lord, please don't be angry with me, but let me bother you this one last time. If you find 10 good people there, what will you do? The Lord said, if I find 10 good people in the city, I will not destroy it. Now, is there any indication that God would have stopped 10? God's lowest number was 10.
Oh,
Is there anything that suggests that he wouldn't have gone down to 5 or gone down to 1 or maybe even gone down to 0 if Abraham had continued pushing the issue?
That's what I was wondering. Abraham just said, don't.
He could have. But at this point, verse 33, then the Lord finished speaking to Abraham and left. Abraham went back home. What did Abraham just do? He gave his authority. He gave consent. He said, God, I agree with the deal. If you find 10, you won't destroy it. I'm happy with that. So God went and he found 1 righteous, and the city was destroyed.
I was just.
Who's governing this conversation? Who's in charge of this conversation? I've always looked at this as, well, Abraham was really bold to negotiate with God, and he was. But Abraham had the authority, and he might not have even known it. Abraham was the one making the decision here.
I think you're right, he didn't know it.
Yeah, but, yeah.
But do you see how this is playing out? God needed Abraham's authority, and he had to finally get him down to a place where he was willing to consent, to agree to whatever number they had just decided upon. And now God has Abraham's authority, and he is legal to do what he's planning to do to the earth. Okay, continuing that idea, let's talk a little bit more about other things in the Old Testament. Amos 3, 7 and 8. Amos 3, 7 and 8. The eternal Lord does nothing without revealing his plans to his servants, the prophets. They are his spokespeople. The lion has roared. Who is not afraid? The eternal Lord has been heard. His prophets can't help but prophesy. Why is it that God does nothing without revealing the plans to the prophets first?
So he can warn his children.
So he can warn his children, okay? That's part of it. Do what? They are his spokespeople. Yes, go on. He needs their authority. He needs them to say it. He needs them to get on board with it. He needs them to agree with what he is doing. And by agreeing, I'm going to announce this to somebody else. Otherwise, I can't do it. The Lord does nothing without revealing it first to his prophets, or to his servants, the prophets, who are his spokespeople. They've got to go tell it. They've got to go say it. And when they tell it, when they say it, they are saying, I agree, I consent. Yes, God, this is a great idea. I don't really like this, but God, okay, I will say it. And when they say it, they're saying, I give you my authority. I give you my consent. I give you my permission to do what you're planning to do. Let's talk about Jonah for a minute. Jonah chapter 1, verses 1 through 3. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, go to Nineveh, that great city, and proclaim judgment against it, for their wickedness has come up to me. But Jonah ran away to Tarshish to escape from the presence of the Lord, and I love this phrase, and his duty as a prophet. So what is he trying to escape from? The presence of the Lord and his duty as a prophet. What was his duty as a prophet? To go speak, to give his consent, to give his permission, to give his authority to the situation by speaking. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish, the most remote of the Phoenician trading cities. So he paid with a fare and went down into the ship to go with him to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. Now, I'm not going to take the time to read it, but you probably know what happens next. The big whale fish, Jonah gets thrown overboard because the storm gets nasty, and he realized, okay, guys, I'm the one at fault here. I'm the one that's causing this. Throw me overboard and you'll be saved. So they did. the fish comes and swallows him up. He spends 3 days, 3 nights in the fish, and he has really a come to Jesus meeting in the bottom of that whale's, big fish's belly. We're familiar with that story. We're familiar with what happens there. I've historically viewed this whale thing as God's answer to Jonah's disobedience. God was not happy that Jonah disobeyed him. So he sent this whale to kind of change his mind. This is not completely wrong, but I'm missing something here. The problem was not that that Jonah didn't do what God wanted him to do, but that God's hands were tied until Jonah said something. God didn't have permission. God didn't have authority to do what he needed to do in Nineveh until Jonah got himself on board and went to Nineveh to start declaring it. Jonah had to go there to say it and thereby grant God the authority to do it. So Jonah is having this come to Jesus meeting in the bottom of the whale. Now, as we go through this, I'm going to read 2 more passages about Jonah. Think about you in regard to some of the things that God's told you to do. Which passage from Jonah most rightly identifies with you? If you were to describe Jonah in this passage, what would you call him? Well, what we just read, what is Jonah? What's he doing? He's disobedient. He's running. What else would you say about him? He was afraid, okay?
He didn't want the people to repent.
He did not want the people to repent. He had a problem with the people of
He
Nineveh.
didn't like him, he didn't want to repent. He wanted God to just wipe him out.
Oh,
And I hate to say it, but there's a few people in life today have had that thought about it, and I didn't ask God to wipe him out.
You're getting to where I'm going here.
Yeah.
There was one morning I was praying, and again, I don't want to get political, but this
Yes.
came about. And the Lord had me pray for Nancy Pelosi. What?
Yeah, I know.
Are you serious? And he and I had a little discussion about this before I decided to comply.
What did you pray?
I'm not going to tell you what I prayed.
Oh, okay.
It was a good prayer. It wasn't a bad prayer.
I prayed that God.
After I got to the place of me being willing to pray the prayer, I was okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to use Jonah as the story of Jonah as the heart of God. Lesson, because see, God didn't want to destroy Nineveh. Are we all on board on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because why? Because he asked Jonah to go prophesy to see if there's change of way. But how do you use Sodom and Gomorrah in God's direction to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah? And I do believe that I can't remember the Sodom, but I believe it's in Hebrews, what you were talking about earlier. But anyways, why would he want to destroy those people versus Nineveh? Okay, well, explain the explanation that the spiritual revelation that I believe that I got from that is simply this. Did God create Lucifer? Yes. Right. A lot of times correction will look different ways. But for Sodom and Gomorrah, they had such a presence that people were drawn. And so they were corrupting the world in such a way that if something was not done, how would Jesus be done? You have to have aversion. See, the perversion of sex was getting so far out there that if it was left to be, then the perversion of all humanity, including the Israelites, would have been so destroyed that the lineage, the perpetuation,
Right,
of
the lineage, yes.
Jesus would not have made.
Yeah.
And so I believe that that's the difference maker between the two stories.
Another difference that I see is the response. I mean, when God went to Sodom and Gomorrah to check that out, they did this vile thing as he was checking it out. I mean, they didn't give him an opportunity to preach, to convert. They didn't do anything. Nineveh received the message.
Angels, weren't they?
The two messages were angels.
They were
Yes.
angels, yeah.
Yes.
They wanted to do the angels. I think that's bad.
So part of it is next week, I think we're going to talk about some of these things about why and how this relates to the kingdom of God now. And some of the, I think we're going to get into some of that next week. So stay tuned. Same bad time, same bad channel. To be continued, right? Okay, Jonah. I ended up praying for Nancy Pelosi that day, and it really surprised me the extent to which I struggled with that, the extent to which I didn't want to do that. And I see a lot of that in Jonah here. And so I ask us, what is it that God's speaking to you that you don't want to do? Not because you're trying to be rebellion or disobedient. You don't want the outcome of that. Well, God, I don't like them. God, I don't want them to be delivered. I don't want them to be saved. I don't want them to be healed. I don't want them to be fill in the blank. How selfish is that of us if we approach that situation like that? How much are we already off? How much are we already wrong for us to even think that way?
We're just walking in our way.
We are.
We hate the evil they do. We hate.
I'm not,
Yeah.
and we don't recognize that we war against flesh and we don't war against flesh and blood, but we war against principalities, powers, spiritual weakness. We're making it a personal thing.
Yeah.
But still, each of us have those situations where we don't want to do this because we don't like what's about to happen if we start doing it. Moving right along.
Or maybe in some situations like that, God is trying to show us we're not any more righteous.
Correct. Yeah.
Like we walk around in this righteousness.
It's only grace.
He's trying to show us.
If it wasn't for my grace, you'd be in the same spot. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. Okay, so Jonah has his come to Jesus meeting in the belly of the whale. Here we go. Pick it up after he decides, okay, I'll go to Nineveh. Chapter 3, verses 1 through 4. The word of the eternal came to the prophet Jonah a second time. Eternal one, get up and go into that powerful and notorious city of Nineveh and pass on to them the message I'm giving you. Having learned his lesson. There's a phrase for you. Having learned his lesson. And my question is, what is it going to take us to learn our lesson? How vivid is God going to have to deal with us about our own, call it prejudice, call it bias, call it whatever, where we don't want to do something he's telling us to do? Verse 3. Having learned his lesson, Jonah yielded to the Eternal's command and headed on the road to Nineveh. Now, Nineveh was an important city, so large that it took 3 days to travel throughout it. Jonah barely had begun to walk the first day's journey into the city when he stopped. Jonah shouting to the people of Nineveh, after 40 days, Nineveh will be annihilated. Now, notice Jonah did not say, if you repent, unless you change. His message was, after 40 days, Nineveh will be annihilated. Now, what ended up happening is the people completely and radically repented. It was a phenomenal thing to watch the extent to which they changed their mind. They changed direction. Very, very positive outcome. We learn later in the book that there's 120,000 people in Nineveh. And from what I can read, most, if not all of them, made a change. Most of all of them decided to get on board with God. That's a credible revival. An evangelist goes into a city of 120,000 and almost all of them give their lives to Jesus. Awesome. Praise God. Amazing results. Did Jonah view those results that way? He was mad. He ended up being ticked off. We're going to read it in just a minute, but he was not happy at all. Here he just had a meeting where the 120,000 people gave their lives to Jesus, almost the whole city, and he's been out of shape about it. Interesting.
Interesting. It's good to use to do that, but probably just to realize his bias and learn the rest of himself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. He learned a lesson in the process of Nineveh being spared. Okay, now let's look at this briefly and then we'll go on and finish this idea. If you evaluate Jonah as being a prophet or a false prophet purely upon the accuracy of what he said, you would have to conclude that he was a false prophet. His word was, after 40 days, Nineveh will be annihilated. Was Nineveh annihilated? It was not annihilated. He didn't say anything about unless they change, unless they repent, unless they go a different direction. His word was, after 40 days, Nineveh will be annihilated. Now, I'm not saying he's a false prophet. I'm just saying you need to be careful when you start judging people by prophecy, because prophecy is conditional. There's always an if. There's always a thing that is your responsibility. There's always a portion of that that's under your control.
Wouldn't that be like someone today saying, you're going to hell? You try to get him to believe in Jesus Christ, that's what he's telling.
Basically, yes.
Yeah,
Right, and to go with the, I can't remember, I think it's verse 3 or verse 2, if it's not verse 3, where Jonah did not accept, his call, if you want to use that word. There are many people who are very eloquently spoken, but it's gonna be the one that God has picked and choose, the one who he's going to move through is gonna be the determination factor of how much fruit is gonna be born from that action. And so I really believe that Jonah probably seen that because of his direct disobedience of God, that he too was going to ultimately be judged by the destruction of the 120,000. Because he refused, that the hardest of his heart, he was going to choose to go with God.
All right, this is the second segment of Jonah. What do you see in Jonah in this passage? He does obey. Is he excited about it? So what would you say? Reluctance, obedience under compulsion? What else would you say about him in this passage?
That he probably didn't have to get a hold of the people too.
Okay.
Because he told some of the, and they would have been the group of people, so you're gonna say I'm gonna be destroyed now? What do you think?
And it probably didn't hurt anything that he smelt like fish stomach contents and had seaweed wrapped around his head as he's walking up to the city to deliver this message. Hey, let me just tell you what happened to me just a few minutes ago.
did you hear Mike Warnke's version of Jonah?
No.
Well, it sounded like he did. He talked about it getting spit it out of the way with all that.
And it wasn't like he could just go to the gas station and take a shower or something. I mean,
He's spitting out right on the shore. He did it like
yeah.
water.
Okay, so do you see a little bit of a progression here in Jonah? First, he didn't want to obey, and then God really gets on his case. And now he's reluctantly obeying. He's still obeying, but it's reluctant. No. He didn't want to him,
Yeah.
not necessarily to them, but to him. Right. Okay. Chapter 4, Jonah 4, 1-3. The mercy God extended toward Nineveh upset Jonah terribly. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. So he prayed to the eternal, Jonah, eternal one. Isn't this what I said would happen when I was still in my own country? Now, there's no record of him saying that. But what we're getting here is some insight on why he didn't obey initially. God, I knew you were going to be gracious. I knew you were going to forgive him. I didn't want to go speak. I didn't want to have them repent. I didn't want them to be on the same side of you as I'm supposed to be on the same side. I didn't want to share the family with them, with those people. Do we have some of those people in our lives? Eternal one, isn't this what I said would happen when I was still in my own country? This is exactly the reason I ran away to Tarshish in the first place. I know how you are. Isn't it good that we know how he is? That God is gracious, that he is long suffering, that he is merciful. I know that you are not like other gods, that you are full of grace and compassion, that it takes a lot to make you angry, and that your loyal love is so great that you are always ready to relent from inflicting misery. Eternal One, since you didn't kill them, please take my life away from me. For my death now is so much better than my life tomorrow. He just gained 120,000 people into the family of God. And he's saying, oh, woe is me. My life is now just awful. He'd be on the front page of Charisma magazine after his successful meeting in Nineveh. What's going on in his life right now? What's he thinking about? He's better than everybody else. Okay. How do we describe Jonah in this passage? He says he's angry. He wants to die, depressed, deceived. I mean, what else is going on in his life right now?
I think it has a lot to do with the contrast with apart from the older brother of the story of the prodigal son.
Okay.
I think he had a works related mentality.
And they haven't done enough works yet to justify this. Okay.
Everybody that felt like he had to achieve this goal, do all these things to get his where he is, and he's probably angry that his work is to give it to him.
You see, a lot of people in that situation I talked about that, was evidence of my anger towards something and not being harnessed and produce consequences for myself. My heart is simply this. If I've learned my music, am I forcing you to listen to my music?
Yeah.
Is that respectful?
Right.
But you stand for respect. If I stand for respect, but I refuse to respect you, am I a hypocrite?
True. Right.
So if you tell me to turn my music down, are you trying to lord over me, or are you trying to promote peace and harmony and goodness to all mankind? So in my perspective, that was my standpoint. But instead, I was deliberately viewed as a bad person. And why? Because I was speaking to the world that wanted to
Right.
hold each other.
Right.
Hold each other's hand and say, no, we have a right to listen to what we want to, just like we have a right to marry whoever we want to. And before you know it, we're gonna be like the state of Illinois, so we can kill whoever we want to. And before you know it, people are going to be back to having relations with animals.
But God. But God.
Well, I mean, the perpetuation is gonna happen.
Oh, right. But we're sin does abound, grace does much more abound. Thank the good Lord.
For those who are in there.
And the opportunity for grace continues to inbound, continues to increase. All right, let's do one more verse and then we'll drop this idea of God needs you today. 1 Samuel 3:19-21. As Samuel grew up, the Lord helped him and made everything Samuel said come true. From the town of Dan in the north to the town of Beersheba in the south, everyone in the country knew that Samuel was truly the Lord's prophet. The Lord often appeared to Samuel at Shiloh and told him what to say. So here you got God that's helping him, that's telling him what to say. Is there any difficulty with the fact that God made everything that Samuel said come to pass? Who's got the authority here? Samuel has the authority. And all he needs to do is get himself in agreement with God. So God, what are you saying? What are you doing? Where are you at? What would you like me to participate with you on? And then once I get there and I say that, then God is free to use his power to back up your authority. Our job is to listen to God speak, to say what he says. And in the process of us saying what he has already said, we authorize him to do what he is saying on the earth. God wants to make everything that we say always come true because we said what he already said. We're giving our consent, our permission for God to use our authority. God needs us. His hands are tied unless he has us involved in the situation. He can't do things that he wants to do. He can't work on the earth in the ways that he wants to until he gets us to agree with him, until he gets us to say it, until he gets us to believe it, until he gets us to act like it. He's limited outside of us. And it's his great pleasure and his great wisdom that he set the system up that way, so that we have to be involved. And so that we get to be involved. It's a responsibility and a blessing. It's both. But it's bigger than most of us have realized before. Well, I don't really want to play for that today. I really don't want to do that today. It's not about you. Get over yourself. It's not about what you want. It's not about what you think is important. Are you seeking first the kingdom, or are you seeking first something else? If you're seeking first the kingdom, you have no vote in what is being said and what is not being said. Your only task is to hear and then speak. Your only task is to get your instructions and do what he said. And then God's responsible for the results.
One of those days, God was not sure what chapter it was. It was common that God was speaking to people.
Correct. Correct.
So he had this young boy.
Correct.
Kept hearing God going. And, did you call me? No. But so his life was in such a manner that he was hearing God. And then when he was walking so tightly with God, or in our day, you could say walking with the Spirit. You know,
Right.
he was so truly walking and being led by the Spirit, but, and I think it's King James Version, or American Standard. I don't know if it's found in the Greek. But the wordage is that none of his words fell to the ground.
Right.
So that's powerful if you think about it. So, and people saw that.
Right.
This kid said something.
Right.
And
it was rare.
Whether it's healing or prayer or whatever.
It was rare in that situation. So it was very distinct.
Like people, if that was the case, and like everything you said was like, people will not bother. They will not mess, because
But you've also got to couple that too. I mean, you've got to be very aware that, okay, your words have this power, so I'm not going to say stuff that's flippant. I'm not just going to run my mouth off loosely or wildly. I've got to be very aware, very conscientious of what I say.
and we're told to not. All of our words to be uplifting and edifying.
Correct.
And not to have any, and I think that sometimes it's so tough to get tied up in at work, you know, people being funny, and I'm this person that loves to make everybody laugh. So then I gotta throw in my 2 cents, and some of it's harmless, some of it's cross the line, but God's always like, in my spirit, that's of course just because the day that they need you to stand in prayer for their relatives or something,
Right.
you're already lowering their expectations of
Of you. That's good.
and you're what you carry.
Right.
So man, I just battle with that.
The Lord got onto me once for sarcasm. I really thrive on sarcasm. I don't usually say it out loud, but I always think it.
Sarcasm is probably usually never uplifting.
It's never uplifting, but it has a more damaging effect to me, because my internal system, when I know that what I'm saying, I don't actually mean, that I mean the opposite. When I actually make a faith declaration, how's it supposed to know the difference? How's it supposed to know, okay, no, this time I really mean it, versus what I said just a few minutes ago when I didn't really mean exactly the way that I said it. I'm like, oh,
Gotta be like, I didn't know I was supposed to help kill that person. I think you just be sarcastic again.